Rain lashes against Sarah Miller's windows as tornado sirens pierce the night. A single mom working two jobs, she can barely keep her own life together. But when she spots a terrified 8-year-old girl wandering through the storm, Sarah doesn't hesitate. Braving the wind and debris, she guides the child to safety, never expecting this simple act of kindness would change everything. Hours later, as the storm clears, a Marine One helicopter descends into her modest backyard. The President of the United States steps out, wanting to meet the heroic mom who risked her life in the midst of nature's fury. But there's more to this story than a chance encounter in a storm. What hidden connection lies between this lost little girl and the most powerful office in the nation? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the horizon when Sarah Miller tied her apron at Lou's Diner, the familiar weight of unpaid bills pressed against her chest from the envelope in her pocket: electric, gas, Emma's school band fees. She'd sort them out later after her shift. Right now, the morning regulars would be arriving soon, and the coffee wasn't going to brew itself. "Mom, you forgot to sign my permission slip." Emma's voice crackled through Sarah's ancient flip phone. The one luxury she couldn't upgrade, not with winter coming and the heating system making those worrying sounds again. "Sorry, sweetheart. It's on the counter by your cereal bowl. Take a picture and I'll sign it when I get home." Sarah wedged the phone between her ear and shoulder, measuring coffee grounds with the precision of someone who'd done it thousands of times before. "Did you remember to lock up?" "Yes, Mom. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 12. Sarah smiled despite her exhaustion. "That's exactly what makes you a kid, baby girl." The diner's bell chimed as Earl Hudson shuffled in, right on schedule. The retired postal worker had been coming in at 5:45 a.m. sharp for the past 15 years, ever since his Margaret passed. Some things in Cedar Grove, Kansas, were as reliable as sunrise. "Morning, Earl." The usual. He settled onto his favorite stool, the one with the slight wobble that Sarah had been meaning to fix. "You know me, Sarah. Though my doctor says I ought to switch to egg whites. Your secret's safe with me." She poured his coffee, black, 2 sugars, and started his Denver omelette before he could change his mind about the doctor's advice. The morning routine was a dance Sarah knew by heart. Earl's omelette, followed by the construction workers' breakfast burritos at 6, the high school teachers grabbing coffee at 6:30, and the county courthouse employees drifting in around 7. Each order, each conversation was a thread in the fabric of her life, simple but sturdy. Between orders, she slipped into Lou's office to work on the books. Accounting had been her minor in college before life had other plans. Now she balanced the diner's books for extra cash, making sure every penny was accounted for. It wasn't much, but combined with her waitressing tips and weekend bookkeeping for other local businesses, it kept her and Emma afloat. Barely. The photo of her late husband, David, smiled at her from her wallet as she pulled out her calculator. 5 years gone, taken by a drunk driver on a night just like any other. The insurance money had run out long ago, leaving them with a mortgage that seemed to grow no matter how many extra shifts she took. "Sarah!" Lou's gravelly voice interrupted her calculations. The old man stood in the doorway, his lined face concerned. "You seen the weather report?" She shook her head, already dreading what he'd say next. Kansas weather was as fickle as fortune, especially in tornado season. They're saying it could be a bad one. Maybe you should head home early, get Emma somewhere safe." "I can't, Lou. I need the hours." The stack of bills in her pocket seemed to grow heavier. Lou's eyes softened. He'd known Sarah since she was a teenager working summers at the diner, had watched her grow from a hopeful college student to a widow struggling to keep her world from unraveling. "The hours will be here tomorrow. Emma shouldn't be alone if this storm hits." Before Sarah could argue, her phone buzzed, a weather alert, bold and urgent on the tiny screen. The National Weather Service was tracking a severe system moving directly toward Cedar Grove. Terms like potentially catastrophic and immediate precautions jumped out at her. Through the diner's windows, she could see the sky darkening prematurely, clouds building into towers that promised something worse than the usual Kansas storm. A few cars hurried past, heading home or to the town's storm shelters. The air felt different. Heavy, expectant, like the pause before a conductor's baton falls. "Go," Lou said, more firmly this time. "I'll close up early anyway. Nobody's going to be thinking about breakfast with that headed our way." Sarah untied, her apron hesitating only briefly before gathering her things. The morning's tips weren't much, but they'd have to do. As she hurried to her car, a 15-year-old Honda with more rust than paint, the wind was already picking up, sending leaves skittering across the parking lot like nature's warning signs. She didn't know it then, but this would be the last normal morning of her old life. In a few hours, everything would change. Her world, her future, and most importantly, her understanding of just how far a mother would go to protect not just her own child, but someone else's too. Sarah's. Honda struggled against the strengthening wind as she made her way through Cedar Grove's emptying streets. The emergency radio, David's old unit, still reliable after all these years, crackled with increasingly urgent warnings from the National Weather Service. Severe thunderstorm warning upgraded to tornado watch for the following counties. The metallic voice competed with the wind's growing howl. Sarah's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as she recognized their county in the list. Her phone rang, Emma's ringtone cutting through the storm's prelude. Sarah fumbled with the hands-free button. "I'm on my way, honey. Are you in the basement?" "Not yet." Emma's voice carried a forced casualness that didn't quite mask her anxiety. "Mrs. Peterson from next door called. She can't get her storm shutters closed." Sarah's heart clenched. "Emma Jean Miller, don't you dare!" "I already helped her." Emma interrupted. "She gave me cookies, the good ones with macadamia nuts." Relief mingled with pride in Sarah's chest. That was her daughter, headstrong and helpful, just like her father. "Okay, but now you get to the basement. Take the emergency kit and the radio, flashlights, and the photo albums." "I know, Mom." There was a pause, filled by distant thunder. "There's something weird happening in town." Sarah slowed at an intersection, squinting through the premature darkness. "Weird how?" "Black SUVs, like a lot of them, all driving toward the highway. And I saw some guys in suits talking to Sheriff Mitchell outside the grocery store." An ambulance screamed past Sarah, lights pulsing against the darkening sky. She pulled over to let it pass, noting absently that it wasn't headed toward the hospital. "Probably emergency management people. They always show up when there's a big storm coming." "Maybe." Emma didn't sound convinced. "But these guys look different. More like the Secret Service people in movies." Sarah was about to respond when movement caught her eye. A military helicopter, definitely not local emergency services, passed low overhead, heading west. Its dark shape was almost lost against the roiling clouds. The radio crackled again, this time with Sheriff Mitchell's voice on the local emergency channel. "All units be advised. We have a situation developing at Checkpoint Alpha. State and federal authorities are en route. All non-essential personnel." "Clear the area immediately. Checkpoint Alpha." Sarah frowned. In 15 years of living in Cedar Grove, she'd never heard of any checkpoints. A massive gust of wind rocked the Honda, sending a shopping cart rolling across the empty supermarket parking lot. The storm was moving faster than predicted. Sarah pressed the accelerator, trying to ignore the peculiar tension in the air, a feeling that had nothing to do with the weather. Her phone rang again. Lou's number. "Sarah, where are you?" His voice was tight with worry. "Almost home. 5 minutes, maybe." "Good. Listen, something's not right. My brother works dispatch for the state troopers. Says there's some kind of security operation happening. Something big. They're clearing all roads west of town. Another helicopter passed overhead, then another. Military again." "Lou, what?" Just get home and stay there. Whatever's happening, it's bigger than the storm." The line went dead. Sarah's mind raced as she turned onto her street. Cedar Grove had never been the kind of place where things happened. They had tornadoes, sure, the occasional drug bust. But military helicopters, Secret Service, it didn't make sense. The wind was strong enough now to scatter garbage cans across lawns. Tree branches whipped frantically, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Above it all, the tornado sirens started their mournful wail. Emma was waiting at the door as Sarah pulled into the driveway. "Mom, quick!" They hurried inside together, Sarah pausing only to grab the mail, more bills probably, from the box. The house creaked ominously around them as they made their way to the basement door. "Did you see them?" Emma asked, helping Sarah collect last-minute supplies, bottles of water, granola bars, her spare asthma inhaler. The helicopters? No, the men in the suits. They were going door to door on Oak Street before the sirens started, looking for someone. Before Sarah could respond, the lights flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, the emergency radio's voice seemed unnaturally loud. "Take immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Repeat, all residents of Cedar Grove and surrounding areas must take immediate shelter." Through the kitchen window, Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. A small figure, illuminated briefly by lightning, stumbling through her backyard. A child alone in the storm. The tornado sirens screamed their warning as Sarah made a decision that would change everything. "Emma, get to the basement, now!" "Mom? What are you—" "Now, Emma!" Sarah grabbed a flashlight and her rain jacket. "Lock the door behind me. I'll be right back." She stepped out into the storm, not knowing she was walking into something far more dangerous than just wind and rain. Behind her, Emma called out, her voice nearly lost in the tempest. "Mom!" The men in suits. They were looking for a little girl. The wind nearly knocked Sarah off her feet as she stepped into the backyard. Rain pelted sideways, stinging her face despite the protection of her jacket hood. Another flash of lightning revealed the child, a girl, maybe 8 or 9, wearing a bright rainbow backpack that looked absurdly cheerful against the storm's fury. "Hey!" Sarah's voice was lost in a crack of thunder. She clicked the flashlight on and off, trying to catch the girl's attention. "Over here! It's not safe!" The girl turned, her face pale and frightened in the beam of light. She clutched something to her chest, a stuffed animal maybe, or a small purse. For a moment she looked ready to run. "It's okay." Sarah took a careful step forward, keeping the light steady. "I'm here to help. We need to get inside." A massive gust of wind sent a neighbor's recycling bin tumbling past like a plastic tumbleweed. The girl stumbled, and Sarah lunged forward, catching her arm before she could fall. "I've got you." Sarah pulled her close, shielding her from the worst of the wind. "My house is right there. We have a basement. You'll be safe." The girl nodded, her whole body trembling. Up close, Sarah could see she was wearing expensive clothes, the kind you didn't find at Cedar Grove's only department store. Her shoes alone probably cost more than Sarah made in a week. They fought their way back to the house, Sarah practically carrying the child the last few steps. Emma must have been watching through the window because the door opened as they reached, it warm light spilling out into the chaos. "Mom!" Emma helped them inside, quickly shutting out the storm. The tornado— As if on cue, the emergency radio in Emma's hand burst to life. "Funnel clouds spotted near Highway 24, moving northeast at 35 miles per hour. Tornado warning now in effect. Take shelter immediately." "Basement," Sarah ordered, guiding both girls toward the door. "Now!" The girl with the rainbow backpack hesitated at the top of the basement stairs. "They said not to go into any buildings," Sarah paused. "Who said that?" "The men who take care of me. They said if we got separated, I should stay outside where they can find me." Another thunderous boom rattled the house's windows. Emma grabbed the girl's hand. "Well, those men aren't here and the tornado is. Come on." The basement was cool and musty, illuminated by battery-powered lanterns Emma had already set up. Their emergency supplies were neatly arranged on the old card table: water, snacks, first aid kit, extra batteries. The photo albums were there. Two rescued from upstairs as instructed. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for her daughter's level-headedness. "I'm Emma," her daughter said, helping the girl sit on their ancient couch. "What's your name?" The girl glanced at Sarah, then back to Emma. "Sophie. Are you hungry, Sophie?" Sarah kept her voice gentle, teacher mode activated. "We have granola bars, crackers. I'm not supposed to take food from strangers." "Smart girl," Sarah nodded, "but I promise these are safe. Look." She opened a granola bar and took a bite. Just regular mum food. Sophie almost smiled at that. She reached for the offered snack with one hand, the other still clutching whatever she'd been holding earlier. Now Sarah could see it was some kind of small tablet computer, matte black and sleek. "Can you tell us who you're staying with?" Sarah asked. "We can try to call them when the storm passes." Sophie shook her head. "I'm not supposed to talk about them. It's classified." Emma's eyes widened. "Classified? Like government secret classified?" Before Sophie could answer, a sound cut through the storm's background roar, rhythmic thumping growing louder. "Helicopter blades." Sophie's face went pale. "Are they here already?" "Who?" Sarah asked, but she was starting to put it together. The men in suits, the military presence, the expensive clothes and classified information. "Sophie, who are you running from?" The girl's answer was drowned out by a deafening crash from upstairs, the sound of their back door being broken down. Heavy footsteps thundered above them, accompanied by sharp professional voices. "U.S. Secret Service, clear the ground floor. Check the basement." Sophie grabbed Sarah's arm, her small fingers digging in with surprising strength. "Please," she whispered, "please don't let them take me back. Not until I can warn Grandpa about the bad people." The basement door handle began to turn. Sarah had only seconds to decide. Trust the authorities bursting into her home, or trust the terrified child clutching her arm. As she made her choice, she had no way of knowing she was about to be caught up in something far bigger than a lost little girl in a storm, something that went all the way to the highest office in the land. Sarah's mind raced as footsteps descended the basement stairs. She pulled both girls behind her, positioning herself between them and the door. The storm still raged outside, but it felt distant now compared to the danger entering her home. "Wait," Sophie whispered urgently. "Check their pins." "Their what?" "The Secret Service pins. The bad people have fake ones. Real ones have tiny blue dots in the corner." The door burst open. Two agents entered, weapons drawn but pointed down. The woman in front had sharp features and moved with practiced efficiency. The man behind her was younger, nervous energy evident in his stance. "Federal agents!" The woman's voice carried authority. "Everyone raise your hands where we can see them." Sarah complied slowly, studying their lapel pins in the lantern light. Both had the tiny blue dots Sophie mentioned. Real agents then. But Sophie was still trembling behind her, and Sarah had learned to trust children's fear. "I'm Sarah Miller. This is my home, my daughter Emma, and—" "Sophie Washington," the female agent cut in. "Thank God. The whole eastern seaboard's been looking for you, Washington." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. She knew that name. Everyone did. The president's granddaughter, who'd been visiting family in Kansas. "Agent Chen," the woman continued, holstering her weapon. "This is Agent Brooks. Sophie, your grandfather's worried sick. Are you hurt?" Sophie stayed behind Sarah, one hand clutching Emma's. "Tell me the password." Agent Chen's expression softened. "Jelly beans and democracy." Some of the tension left Sophie's shoulders, but she didn't move. "I need to talk to Grandpa first, before anyone else." "That's not protocol, honey. We need to get you to a secure location." "No," Sophie's voice rose. "They'll stop me from telling him about the pictures and the bad people." And thunder crashed overhead, and the basement lights flickered as the backup generator kicked in. Agent Brooks spoke into his wrist mic. Package located, residence secure, but ma'am, we've got an active tornado bearing down, ETA 3 minutes. Everybody down. Sarah recognized the sound before the others, that terrible freight train. Roar that every Kansan knew. She grabbed both girls, pulling them under the sturdy workbench against the far wall. The agents dove for cover as the house above them groaned under the twister's assault. For 2 terrifying minutes, the world was chaos. The basement door slammed shut and open again. Debris pelted the small windows. Sarah held the girls tight, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed. When the roar finally faded, they emerged to find the basement miraculously intact. The same couldn't be said for the upper floor, judging by the sounds of wind and rain now pouring in from above. Status report, Agent Chen was saying into her own mic, brushing dust from her suit. Negative on immediate extraction, structure compromised, roads blocked. She paused, listening. Yes, sir. Understood. She turned to Sarah. Mrs. Miller, I'm afraid we're stuck here until emergency services can clear a path. But I need you to understand something. You're now involved in a matter of national security. Everything that happens from this point forward is classified. Sarah looked at Sophie, who was clutching her tablet like a lifeline. She said something about warning her grandfather, about bad people. Sophie has an active imagination. No, I don't. Sophie finally stepped forward. Show them, Emma. Emma pulled something from her pocket, a Secret Service pin, identical to the agent's except for one detail, no blue dot. I found it in Sophie's backpack, Emma explained. And there's more. Show them the pictures, Sophie. Sophie held out her tablet, hands shaking slightly. I wasn't supposed to be in Grandpa's office that day, but I forgot my sweater after dinner, and when I went back, she swiped through several photos. I saw them, the bad people. They were putting something in his coffee. Agent Chen's professional mask cracked slightly as she examined the images. She and Brooks exchanged loaded glances. Mrs. Miller, Chen, said finally, I hope you have more batteries for those lanterns. It's going to be a long night. Sarah pulled Emma close, feeling the weight of what they'd stumbled into. Outside, emergency sirens wailed into the storm-dark afternoon, but it wasn't the tornado that worried her anymore. It was the growing certainty that her simple life in Cedar Grove had just become entangled in something far more dangerous than mere weather. And somewhere above them, through the hole torn in her roof, she could hear the distinctive sound of more helicopters approaching. The storm's fury had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm, punctuated by the whirl of helicopter blades. Sarah stood in what remained of her living room, watching through the partially collapsed roof as Marine One descended onto her waterlogged back lawn. The presidential seal on its side gleamed in the emerging sunlight, surreal against the backdrop of tornado debris. Mom, Emma whispered. Is that really? Stay with Sophie, Sarah told her daughter, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. Her house was in shambles. She was surrounded by Secret Service agents, and the President of the United States was about to walk through her broken screen door. Just another Tuesday in Cedar Grove. Agent Chen positioned herself by the door, speaking rapidly into her earpiece. Eagle is on the ground. Crown secure. Residence is compromised, but stable. President James Washington was younger in person than he looked on television. Though the past few hours had clearly taken their toll, he ducked through the doorway, radiating authority despite being speckled with rain. Grandpa! Sophie's voice cracked with emotion. She started forward, but Agent Brooks held up a hand. Security sweep first, Miss Washington. The President's security detail quickly cleared the room. Sarah watched the choreographed process with a mix of awe and exhaustion, acutely aware of her mud-stained clothes and the shattered state of her home. Where's my granddaughter? The President's voice carried the weight of both his office and his worry. She's safe, sir, Agent Chen reported. Mrs. Miller brought her in from the storm. The tornado complicated extraction, but it wasn't just the storm. Sophie broke free from Emma's grip, running to her grandfather. You have to listen. They're trying to hurt you. President Washington knelt to embrace her, his face tight with concern. Who's trying to hurt me, sweetheart? The people in your office. I saw them. Sophie fumbled with her tablet. The ones with the fake pins, like this one. She held up the pin Emma had found. The president examined it, his expression darkening. He looked at Agent Chen. Explain. Sir, Sophie managed to photograph several individuals in your private office last week. Individuals who weren't cleared to be there. Chen's professional tone couldn't quite mask her unease. And the pin, it's an exact replica of our current design, except for the authentication marker. Show me the photos. Sophie's small hands shook as she pulled up the images. Sarah caught glimpses as the president swiped through them, men in suits standing. Around his desk, something being poured into a coffee cup, documents spread across the presidential seal. That's why I ran, Sophie said. I heard them talking about the summit next week, about making sure you couldn't what, honey? Sign the new treaty. They said it would ruin everything they'd worked for. Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. They saw me, Grandpa, in the doorway. That's when I ran. The president's face had gone pale. He looked at Sarah, really seeing her for the first time. Mrs. Miller, you understand this conversation is classified at the highest levels? Sarah nodded, putting an arm around Emma, who had drifted closer. Yes, sir. But with all due respect, my daughter and I are already involved. Someone tried to hurt your granddaughter, and now they know where she is. Mom. Emma tugged at her sleeve, pointing through the broken window. More cars coming. Black SUVs were pulling up outside, their occupants emerging with the same efficient movements as the Secret Service, but somehow different. Sarah noticed Agent Chen's hand drift to her weapon. Sir, Chen said quietly, those aren't our people. The president straightened, every inch the commander-in-chief. Get Sophie to the helicopter. Mrs. Miller, you and your daughter need to come with us. This house isn't safe anymore. But my home will be rebuilt better than before. His tone left no room for argument. Right now, you're the only civilian witnesses to a major security breach, and more importantly, you protected my granddaughter when everyone else was trying to control her. We need your help. Through the window, Sarah watched the new arrivals approach her front door. Their pins gleamed in the post-storm sun, perfect replicas, without a blue dot in sight. Emma, she said, making her decision, grab the photo albums. And your emergency bag. We're taking a little trip. The sound of Marine One's engines spooling up mixed with heavy footsteps on her front porch. As they hurried toward the back door, Sarah caught a glimpse of her wall calendar fluttering in the wind. Just another Tuesday in Cedar Grove, Kansas, where a single mum's simple act of kindness was about to thrust her into the heart of a presidential conspiracy. She just hoped they'd let her call Lou to explain why she wouldn't be making it to her. Shift tomorrow. The first news helicopter appeared before they'd even crossed into Missouri airspace. Sarah watched it through Marine One's window, keeping one arm protectively around Emma, who had finally dozed off against her shoulder. On the seat across from them, Sophie was curled up with her tablet, the president's jacket draped over her like a blanket. CNN, Agent Chen noted, glancing at the approaching aircraft. They're faster than usual. Social media, Brooks added, looking at his phone. Someone in Cedar Grove posted video of the landing. It's already trending. President's mystery visit to Tornado Town. Sarah's own phone had been buzzing non-stop with texts and calls. Lou, neighbors, Emma's teachers, all wanting to know if she was okay, if the rumors were true. She'd been instructed not to answer any of them yet. Mrs. Miller. The president looked up from his secure laptop. I'm afraid your life is about to become considerably more complicated. Agent Chen will brief you on security protocols, but first, he gestured to a staff member who handed Sarah a tablet. I think you should see what the world is saying about you. The screen showed various news websites, all featuring variations of the same story. Photos of her house, or what remained of it, splashed across headlines. Kansas mom saves president's granddaughter during tornado. Heroic single mother shields first family from storm. White House confirms presidential granddaughter found. Safe with small-town waitress. Below the headlines were pictures of her, old Facebook photos, her staff photo from Lou's Diner, even her college graduation picture. Personal details were already emerging. Widowed mother of one, works 2 jobs to support daughter, active in local PTA. How did they get all this so fast? Welcome to the digital age, Chen said sympathetically. By tomorrow morning, they'll probably know your first-grade teacher's name. Emma stirred, blinking at the tablet's glow. Mom, are we famous now? Not if I can help it, Sarah muttered, but the president chuckled. I'm afraid that ship has sailed, but we can help you manage it. He leaned forward, his expression serious. The public story is simple. My granddaughter got separated from her security detail during the storm, and you heroically took her in. It's true as far as it goes. The rest, the security breach, the conspiracy, stays classified. What about our house? Emma asked. Can we go home? The president and Agent Chen exchanged looks. Not yet, Chen said. We need to secure the location and investigate the individuals who showed up after us. You'll be staying at a safe house until... Breaking news update, sir, Brooks interrupted, holding up his phone. They're running with a new angle. Someone talked. The tablet in Sarah's hands refreshed automatically. New headlines scrolled across the screen. Sources claim presidential. Granddaughter was running from something. Mystery surrounds. Sophie Washington's presence in Kansas. Security questions arise. Why was first family in Cedar Grove? Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the helicopter's air conditioning. They're getting closer to the truth. Let them speculate, the president said, but his jaw was tight. Our priority is keeping all of you safe while we identify the breach in my security team. He looked at Sophie, still sleeping soundly. And finding out exactly what my granddaughter saw in that office. Emma peered at the tablet, reading the comments section. Mom, people are saying really nice things about you. Look, finally, a real American hero. This is the kind of story we need right now. She scrolled further. Someone started a GoFundMe for our house. No fundraisers, Chen said firmly. The government will handle all expenses. Speaking of which, she handed Sarah a thick envelope. Non-disclosure agreements. Standard procedure. Sarah thumbed through the dense legal documents, her head spinning. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry had been making the electric bill. Now she was signing government secrets acts on Air Force One, while social media turned her into some kind of folk hero. There's something else you should know, Brooks said, looking uncomfortable. The diner, it's becoming a thing. People are leaving flowers. News vans are setting up in the parking lot. Poor Lou, Sarah sighed. Then she noticed the president's questioning look. My boss. Though I guess I should call him and quit. Already handled, Chen assured her. He's been briefed on the basics and given a cover story. The diner will be compensated for any disruption. The helicopter banked gently, heading toward a private airstrip where Air Force One waited. Sarah watched the sunset paint the clouds in shades of gold and pink, trying to process how completely her life had changed since that first thunderclap. Mom! Emma's voice was small. What happens now? Before Sarah could answer, Sophie sat up suddenly, fully awake. Now, she said with surprising clarity, we stopped the bad people from hurting my grandpa, and your mom is going to help, because she's the only one they don't know about yet. The president raised an eyebrow at his granddaughter's declaration, but Sarah noticed he didn't disagree. Neither did Agent Chen. Sarah looked out at the gathering dusk, wondering what other storms were brewing on their horizon. At least the tornado had been straightforward. You went to the basement, you waited it out, you cleaned up after. But this storm of secrets and conspiracies and sudden fame, no weather radio could have prepared her for that. The safe house looked exactly like what it was trying not to be, a fortress pretending to be a suburban home. Sarah noted the reinforced windows, the subtle security cameras, the way the ornamental bushes provided clear lines of sight in all directions. Even the rocking chairs on the front porch were positioned for optimal surveillance coverage. Electronic. "Sweeps are complete," Agent Brooks announced as they entered. "House is clean." Sarah watched Emma explore their temporary refuge with curious eyes. Everything was beige and bland, carefully chosen to be forgettable, the kind of house you'd drive past 1,000 times and never remember. "Your rooms are upstairs," Chen directed. "Mrs. Miller, you're in Master Suite A. Emma and Sophie will share the adjacent room. We have agents posted at all entry points and—" She stopped, noticing Sophie's sudden tension. "What's wrong?" "The backpack," Sophie whispered. "I left it on the helicopter." "It's being brought in with the rest of the bags," the president assured her, but Sophie was already shaking her head. "No, you don't understand. The thumb drive, it's in the front pocket. I took it from his desk when I saw—" She broke off, looking scared. "Saw what, honey?" The president knelt to her level. "What was on that drive?" Before Sophie could answer, Brooks rushed in. "Sir, we have a situation. The backpack isn't on the helicopter. We've searched everywhere." The color drained from Sophie's face. "They'll know now. They'll know I saw everything." Emma stepped forward. "No, they won't." She reached into her own bag and pulled out a rainbow-colored front pocket, cleanly separated from the rest of the backpack. "I saw you slip something in here during the storm, the way you kept checking it. I thought it might be important, so when they were loading the helicopter—" She shrugged. "I'm good with scissors." Sarah wasn't sure whether to be proud of her daughter's quick thinking or concerned about her apparent skill at covert operations. The president took the thumb drive from the pocket, turning it over in his hands. "This was in my private office," Sophie nodded. "In the bottom drawer under the pictures of Grandma. I saw them put it there when they thought I was asleep on your couch. They said it was insurance." Chen already had a secure laptop ready. The drive's contents were encrypted, but it took the president less than a minute to guess the password. "My wife's birthday," he said grimly. "They're taunting me." The files opened to reveal documents, photographs, and video clips. Sarah caught glimpses of meetings in elegant rooms, handshakes between men in expensive suits, numbers with too many zeros behind them. "Sir," Chen's voice was carefully controlled. "These are records of every backdoor deal and illegal agreement from the last 3 administrations. Blackmail material on half the cabinet. And this," she pointed to a folder labeled Summit, "appears to be a detailed plan to force you to reject the new Pacific Rim trade agreement. By any means necessary," Sophie added quietly. "That's what they said, even if they had to make you too sick to attend." The president's hands clenched. "The coffee. Poison?" Sarah asked, instinctively pulling both girls closer. "Worse," Chen said, reading from the screen. "A compound designed to mimic early-stage dementia, enough to raise questions about your fitness for office right before the summit." Emma, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly pointed at one of the photographs. "Mom, look, that man, he was at the diner last week, the one who kept asking Lou questions about our regulars." Sarah peered at the image. She remembered him. Expensive suit, too much cologne, questions that seemed casual but probed for details about local security and routines. "They've been planning this for weeks," Chen realized. Cedar Grove wasn't random. They were setting up a fallback position, which means— A phone rang. Not any of their phones, but a device hidden inside the torn backpack pocket. The screen showed a single text message. "We know the girl saw us. We know she has proof. The tornado was unfortunate timing, but perhaps useful. After all, tragic accidents happen during natural disasters all the time, especially to heroic single mothers and their children." The message was signed with a small digital image, a Secret Service pin, perfect in every detail except for the missing blue dot. Sarah met the president's eyes. Still want me to stick to the simple public story about saving your granddaughter? Who from the storm? His response was cut off by Agent Brooks rushing in. Sir, we have multiple vehicles approaching. No transponders, no official tags. Through the front window, Sarah watched black SUVs roll to a stop along the quiet suburban street. Men in suits emerged, their lapel pins catching the last light of day. None of them had blue dots. The next hour was a blur of motion and tactical decisions. Sarah watched in amazement as the safe house revealed its secrets: reinforced panic rooms, hidden evacuation routes, and a basement command center that made her storm shelter look like a broom closet. Clear the street, Agent Chen barked into her comm unit. I want those vehicles identified and their occupants run through every database we have. Won't matter, Sophie said quietly, clutching her tablet. They'll have fake ADs, perfect ones. The president paced the command center, his usual composed demeanor showing cracks. We can't evacuate without drawing attention. Can't trust local law enforcement because we don't know how deep this goes. Can't call in military support without alerting the media. He stopped, looking at Sarah. But they don't know about you. Not really, sir. Sarah didn't like the calculating look in his eyes. They know you saved Sophie from the storm. They think you're just a waitress who got lucky, or unlucky, depending on their perspective. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Which is why I'm offering you a job, Sarah blinked. I already have 2 jobs. Not like this one. He handed her the envelope. Inside was an official White House document, the presidential seal embossed in gold. How would you like to be my new personal assistant? Emma, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop while helping Sophie organize her files, looked up sharply. Mom, that's like the most important job ever. It's also a death sentence, Chen cut in. Sir, with all due respect, you can't possibly— I can and I must. The president's voice carried the weight of command. Think about it. They've infiltrated my security detail, my household staff, possibly even my cabinet. But Sarah Miller, she's an unknown variable. No political connections, no hidden agenda. Just a mother who did the right thing at the right time. And that's exactly why I should say no, Sarah replied, though her hands gripped the envelope tighter. I'm just a waitress, a bookkeeper. I don't know anything about politics or conspiracies or— You know about people, Sophie interrupted. You knew to check the pins. You knew I was scared without me saying it. You make everyone feel safe like my grandma used to. The room fell quiet at that. The president's wife had passed away 2 years ago, a loss the nation had mourned, but the family still felt deeply. There's something else, the president said softly. The summit isn't just about trade. It's about preventing a war. If I don't sign that agreement, China and North Korea will take it as a signal to escalate their military positions in the Pacific. We'll be looking at a conflict that could make the Cold War look like a minor disagreement. Sarah thought about the bills in her pocket, about Emma's college fund that barely had 3 digits, about the mortgage she could barely afford. Then she thought about her daughter growing up in a world at war. What exactly would this job entail? Officially, managing my daily schedule, handling correspondence, being my public face to the staff. He smiled slightly. Unofficially, helping us identify the conspirators by doing what you do best, observing people, noticing details, following your instincts about who to trust, and keeping Sophie safe, Chen added reluctantly. They'll never expect us to hide her in plain sight, right next to her grandfather. You want me to bring my daughter into this? Sarah gestured at the surveillance screens showing armed men outside. Into that, Mom. Emma's voice was surprisingly steady. Our house has a hole in the roof and bad guys already threatened to kill us. Pretty sure we're already in this. A message flashed across the main screen. The men outside were requesting Entry, claiming to be from an NSA counter-terrorism unit. Their credentials looked perfect. Time's up, Chen announced. We need to make a decision. Do we run or do we fight? Sarah looked at the envelope in her hands, then at Emma's determined face, at Sophie's hopeful eyes, at the president's grim expression. She thought about David, about what he would say if he were here. He'd always told her she had a gift for reading people, for seeing the truth behind their masks. I have conditions, she said finally. Emma's safety comes first, and I want a raise for Lou. His diner's going to be a media circus for months. The president's smile was genuine this time. Welcome to public service, Mrs. Miller. Agent Chen. We'll handle your security clearance. He turned to the command center staff. Let our visitors in. Let's see how they handle meeting my new personal assistant. Sarah smoothed her tornado-wrinkled shirt, suddenly very aware she was about to face trained operatives while looking like she'd just walked through, well, a tornado. But maybe that was perfect. After all, they were expecting a simple waitress. From Kansas, they weren't expecting a mother who'd do anything to protect not just her child, but everyone's children, from the storm that was coming. Sarah stood before the mirror in the safe house's powder room, armed with a borrowed blazer and her old family photos. Agent Chen had given her 5 minutes to look the part before their visitors were escorted in. The blazer belonged to another agent and smelled of unfamiliar perfume. The photos were her own, tucked into her pocket like a talisman. Remember? Chen's voice came through the door. You've been the president's assistant for 3 months. You were hired through normal channels. Background checks were completed last quarter. Sarah studied her reflection. The woman looking back at her had chased tornadoes, faced down drunk customers at the diner, and raised a daughter alone after her world fell apart. She could do this. Your predecessor left to handle family matters, Chen continued coaching. All. The paperwork is being backdated now. If they check, they'll check, Sarah said, opening the door. So let's give them something real to find. She pulled out her family album, removing a photo of herself at her college graduation. Have your people add this to my file. I really did graduate with honors in business administration. I really did work as an office manager before David died. She pulled out another photo. And this is from my volunteer work at Emma's school. PTA treasurer for 3 years. All of it real, all of it verifiable. Chen's expression shifted from professional distance to something like respect. The best covers are built on truth. I'm not building a cover, Sarah replied, straightening. The blazer. I'm just showing them who I've always been. A mother who's good with details and doesn't quit when things get hard. A commotion from downstairs signaled their visitor's arrival. Sarah touched the photo of David one last time before sliding it back into the album. Watch Emma for me? Already arranged. She and Sophie are in the secure room with full surveillance and a direct line to the president. Chen checked her weapon discreetly. Ready for your first staff meeting. Sarah thought of all the difficult customers she'd handled at Lou's, all the angry parents at PTA meetings, all the bill collectors she'd negotiated with. I've been handling difficult people for years, just usually with coffee instead of national. Security clearance. They descended to find 4 men in impeccable suits being scanned for weapons in the foyer. Their leader, a silver-haired man with cold eyes, smiled with practiced charm. Secret Service Assistant Director Marcus Webb, he introduced himself. We're here to escort the president's granddaughter to a more secure location. Sarah stepped forward, channeling every difficult conversation she'd ever handled at the diner. Sarah Miller, personal assistant to the president. I'm afraid there's been a miscommunication. Miss Sophie's security arrangements have already been settled. Webb's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Mrs. Miller, the tornado hero. How convenient that you're here. The president values competence and quick thinking, Sarah replied, letting just a touch of Kansas steel enter her voice. Now, about that miscommunication. She gestured to the sitting room, every inch the efficient assistant. while her mind raced through the details she'd observed. Webb's suit was perfectly pressed despite the late hour. His shoes were spotless, though it had been raining. He'd come prepared for this meeting, not rushed here on emergency orders. "Our orders come directly from the NSA director," Webb said, following her lead, but clearly thrown off script. After the security breach, which security breach would that be? Sarah pulled out her new tablet, preloaded with the president's actual schedule. "I'm not showing any logged incidents that would warrant NSA intervention." Webb's colleagues shifted uneasily. They hadn't expected to be questioned by a civilian assistant. That was exactly what the president had counted on. "The breach is classified," Webb said smoothly, "above your clearance level. Nothing concerning the president's family is above my clearance, Mr. Webb." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Would you like me to call him to confirm? He's just upstairs, reviewing security footage of your team's arrival." The threat was clear. They were being recorded, their faces captured, their presence documented. If they were who they claimed to be, this wouldn't be a problem. Webb checked his watch with practiced casualness. "Perhaps there has been a miscommunication. We'll need to verify protocols with our superiors." Of course. Sarah was already drafting a memo on her tablet. "I'll just need your badge numbers and authorization codes for the log. Standard procedure? I'm sure you understand." They understood perfectly. Within 2 minutes, Webb and his team were gone, their excuses as polished as their shoes. "Well played," Chen said quietly as they watched the SUVs pull away. "But they'll be back, with better documentation and a stronger plan." "No," Sarah replied, thinking of the tiny details she'd catalogued. The way Webb's team had positioned themselves, the slight bulge of non-standard weapons under their jackets, the familiar cologne she'd smelled 2 days ago at the diner. "They'll report to their real bosses, and now we know what they look like." The president appeared at the top of the stairs. "Sarah's right. Webb wasn't here to take Sophie. He was here to confirm what she saw in my office, to find out how much we know." He looked at Sarah with newfound appreciation. "Still think you're just a waitress?" Sarah thought of Emma and Sophie watching through the security cameras, learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stand your ground and ask the right questions. "No, sir," she replied. "I think I'm exactly who I need to be." She checked her tablet's clock. "Now about your real schedule for tomorrow." The White House moving team arrived at dawn, their trucks unmarked and their uniforms deliberately generic. Sarah watched them pack up her tornado-damaged home with military precision, cataloguing every item like evidence. "Mom," Emma called from upstairs, "they're saying I can only take 2 boxes of books." "National security weight restrictions," Agent Chen explained, appearing beside Sarah with yet another stack of documents requiring signatures. "The less we move, the fewer opportunities for tracking or tampering." Sarah nodded, signing where indicated while watching 2 agents carefully wrap the family photos from the living room. "And the fewer things to bomb, you mean?" Chen didn't deny it. After Webb's visit to the safe house 3 days ago, no one was pretending this was just about Sophie anymore. The morning's headlines scrolled across Sarah's new secure phone: "Kansas tornado hero appointed to White House staff, from diner to DC, American dream or political theater." Questions surround President's new hire. "They're going to dig," Sarah said, scanning the articles. "Someone will eventually find something. Let them dig." Chen's smile was razor-sharp. "Everything they'll find is exactly what we want them to see. Your entire history has been vetted and verified. Even that speeding ticket from college. I was late for a final exam. And now you're the relatable human interest story. The hard-working single mom who saved the president's granddaughter and earned a shot at the American dream." Chen gestured at the news helicopters circling discreetly above Cedar Grove. "Every background check they run, every interview with your neighbors, every deep dive into your past just reinforces the narrative." A crash from upstairs made them both jump. "Sorry," Emma's voice called down. "Just dropped my geology collection." "Speaking Of covers. Chen lowered her voice. Sophie's school records have been transferred to Sidwell Friends. Emma's too. They'll be classmates. Sarah's breath caught. The most prestigious private school in D.C., where children of presidents and diplomats had studied for generations. We can't afford, the president insists. It's the most secure option, and it maintains the story. His new assistant would naturally receive the same staff benefits as her predecessors. Through the broken window, Sarah could see the media encampment that had sprung up at the end of her street. Local reporters mixed with national networks, all hoping for a glimpse of the tornado hero and her daughter. None of them had connected her to Webb's visit to the safe house or to the sudden reassignment of 3 senior NSA officials the day after. "Mrs. Miller?" A young agent appeared in the doorway. "The president is asking for you. Something about the summit seating arrangements?" Sarah checked her tablet where the real meaning of the summons was encrypted. New intelligence about the conspiracy. "Of course! Emma! Remember to pack your homework. Just because we're moving to DC doesn't mean your math test is cancelled." She followed the agent to a secure vehicle, noting the careful formation of protective details around the house. To anyone watching, it looked like routine security for a new White House staffer. Only Sarah saw the snipers on the neighboring roofs, the plainclothes agents monitoring radio frequencies, the subtle signs of a protective operation in full swing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lou. "Channel 7 offering big money for interviews about you. Told them all I know is you make the best cherry pie in Kansas." "That part's true, at least," Sarah smiled, remembering the real conversation she'd had with Lou in the diner's kitchen 2 days ago. He'd listened to her careful explanations, her coded warnings about watching for certain customers, and had simply nodded and said, "Always knew you were meant for bigger things than my little diner." The car pulled away from her house. Her old house, she corrected mentally. The moving trucks would follow later, taking carefully screened routes to DC. Emma and Sophie were already at the safe house, preparing for their own secure transport. As they turned onto the main road, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the bulletproof window. She was wearing another borrowed blazer, her hair neat, her posture professional. A proper White House assistant, ready to manage the president's schedule and help protect his family. But in her pocket, she still carried her diner nameplate. Sarah Miller, it read simply, because that's who she still was, under the blazer and security clearance. A mother, a survivor, a woman who understood that sometimes the best way to protect what matters is to hide in plain sight. The car turned east toward Washington, toward a new life filled with both promise and danger. Behind them, the Kansas sky stretched endless and blue, holding no trace of the tornado that had started it all. But Sarah knew better now. The deadliest storms were the ones you never saw coming. The White House was nothing like the tours Sarah had seen on TV. Behind the public spaces, it was a maze of narrow corridors, security checkpoints, and offices humming with quiet urgency. Her new workspace, a modest room adjacent to the president's private office, had bulletproof windows overlooking the Rose Garden and enough surveillance equipment to make a spy movie look understocked. "Coffee delivery," announced Diane Hawthorne, sweeping in with 2 steaming cups. As the Chief of Staff's executive secretary, she was supposedly helping Sarah adjust to her new role. As Sarah had noted in her secure daily reports, she was also watching every move the new assistant made. "Thanks." Sarah accepted the coffee, noting how Diane's designer suit and perfectly manicured nails contrasted with her own department store blazer. "The president's morning brief is in 10 minutes, assuming Secretary Malcolm is on time for once." Diane's laugh tinkled like expensive crystal. "Between us girls, he's been so distracted lately. All those late-night meetings at the Madison Hotel." Sarah made a non-committal noise while adding to her mental file. Malcolm had been on Sophie's photos from the Oval Office, standing just out of frame. The Madison was known for its private dining rooms and lack of security cameras. "By the way," Diane continued, "we're all so impressed with how quickly you've adapted. Most people find the protocols overwhelming at first." I suppose running a diner isn't that different, Sarah replied, thinking of her real training sessions with Agent Chen. Keep track of everyone's preferences, anticipate needs, watch for trouble before it starts. Her new tablet chimed, a message from Emma routed through the secure family server. First day going okay. Sophie says hi. BTW, my science teacher, has a weird pin collection on his desk. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral as Diane peered over her shoulder. Kids, she said with a practiced mom sigh, always texting during school. The door opened, admitting a stream of serious-faced men and women for the morning briefing. Sarah noted each arrival, matching faces to the files she'd memorized during sleepless nights at the safe house. Senator Clark, who always stood too close to the president's chair. Undersecretary Hayes, whose cologne matched what she'd smelled in her diner the week before the tornado. Sarah! The president's voice carried that careful blend of authority and familiarity they'd rehearsed. The trade reports from last night. She handed him the folder, their fingers brushing briefly over a small note hidden among the papers. Webb spotted at Sidwell Friends. The president's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw his jaw tighten. Thank you. Diane, would you fetch the Asia-Pacific briefing materials? The moment Diane left, the atmosphere shifted. Report, the president said quietly. 3 more confirmed. Matches from Sophie's photos, Sarah murmured, adjusting papers on her desk. Malcolm's hotel meetings align with the timeline on the thumb drive, and now Webb's showing interest in the school, which means we're getting close. He raised his voice as footsteps approached. And make sure the summit seating arrangements account for cultural protocols. Diane returned with another stack of folders, followed by a man Sarah recognized from her briefings. James Harrison, Deputy Director of the NSA, the same agency Webb had claimed to represent. Jim, the president greeted him. I don't usually. See you at morning brief. Urgent matter, sir. Harrison's gaze flickered to Sarah, perhaps in private. Mrs. Miller has full clearance, the president said mildly, and an excellent memory for details. The implied threat was subtle. Harrison forced a smile. Of course, it's about the summit security arrangements. We've had some concerning intelligence. Sarah appeared to focus on her tablet while her mind raced. Harrison's tie bar was slightly crooked, unusual for a man known for military precision. His hands showed traces of ink stains, like someone who'd been up all night handling papers. And when he shifted his weight, she caught a glimpse of his lapel pin, perfect in every detail, except for the missing blue dot. Her tablet lit up with another message from Emma. Science teacher has pics with Malcolm on his desk. Class trip to Madison Hotel last month? Sarah kept her face carefully blank as she typed, Good eye, honey, stay close to Sophie. The briefing continued, a dance of power and pretense. Harrison outlined increased security measures that would actually leave the president more vulnerable. Diane efficiently managed papers that could be either routine or treasonous. And Sarah, the simple waitress from Kansas, watched it all while calculating how many of the people in this historic room were planning to topple the government. One more thing, Harrison said as the meeting wound down. About your new assistant, sir. We've finished our background review and have some concerns. I'm sure you do, the president replied. Sarah, please call my daughter about the school situation. School situation. Their code for immediate threat to the girls. Sarah reached for her phone, remembering all those years of handling difficult customers at the diner. Stay calm, keep smiling, and know where all the exits are. She'd learned more than just coffee orders at Lou's. She'd learned that the most dangerous people were often the ones in suits and ties, the ones with perfect manners and empty smiles, the ones with pins that looked just right, except for one tiny missing dot. The real Oval Office, Sarah had learned, wasn't in the White House at all. It was in a secure bunker beneath the East Wing, where the president could work without worrying about hidden cameras or bugs. That's where she found herself at midnight, watching Agent Chen lay out surveillance, photos across the antique desk. Timeline matches, Chen said, pointing to images of Malcolm leaving the Madison Hotel. Every Tuesday for the past month, always after meeting with these men. Sarah studied the photos. The one on the left was at my diner in Kansas. He ordered coffee, black, but never drank it, just kept asking about local security patrols. Because they were planning multiple extraction points, the president said, pacing the room. The tornado wasn't part of their plan, but they adapted, used the chaos as cover. Sir, a young analyst appeared in the doorway. We've decoded more. Files from the thumb drive. You need to see this. The decoded documents flashed across the secure screens. Banking transfers, shell companies, military orders carefully hidden in routine paperwork. Sarah's accounting background kicked in as she followed the money trail. These aren't just bribes, she realized. They're setting up a shadow government. Look, infrastructure, communications, emergency response networks. They're not just trying to stop you from signing the trade agreement. They're preparing for a coup, the president finished grimly, using my supposed mental decline as justification. The trade summit was just their deadline. Sarah's tablet buzzed, the special tone she'd set for Emma's secure messages. Her daughter had proven surprisingly adept at gathering intelligence from her new school. Mom, Sophie found something weird in the science lab. Chemical formulas that don't match the textbook. Teacher got really nervous when she asked about them. Chen read the message over Sarah's shoulder. The compound they were planning to use on you, sir. They're manufacturing it at the school. Hidden. In plain sight, Sarah murmured. Who would suspect a prestigious private school, the same place where they could keep tabs on Sophie, make sure she didn't talk? The president's phone rang, a direct line that hadn't rung once in the 3 weeks Sarah had worked there. His face went ash-white as he listened. When? He demanded. How many? Another pause. Lock it down. No one in or out. He hung up, hands shaking slightly. There's been a break-in at the school. Armed men with diplomatic credentials. They have hostages. Sarah's heart stopped. Emma? Both girls are safe. They were in the secure basement room we set up, practicing their storm drill like you taught them. His attempt at a smile failed. But Malcolm and Harrison are both on site, claiming to handle the situation. It's happening. Now, Chen realized. They're making their move early. The summit's not for 3 days. Because they know we're onto them, Sarah said, mind-racing. Webb at the school, Harrison watching me, Malcolm's sudden interest in the morning briefings. They know Sophie has evidence. They know we're investigating, but they don't know exactly what we've found. The president pressed a button, sealing the bunker. Options? Military response would take too long to mobilize without tipping our hand, Chen reported. Local police are compromised. Malcolm made sure his people were in key positions. Secret. Service? She gestured to her own blue-dotted pin. We know they've infiltrated us too. Sarah stared at the school's blueprint on her tablet, remembering every detail Emma had shared about the building's layout, about the science lab's location, the drainage tunnels she'd discovered during an impromptu exploration that she definitely wasn't supposed to be doing, the service elevator that connected to the old fallout shelter. They'll be expecting a tactical response, she said slowly. Marines, snipers, negotiators. But they don't know about the tunnels. They don't know that Emma's been mapping them, or that Sophie's been testing the security systems as a science project, because they still think you're just my assistant. The president caught on. And Emma's just a normal 12-year-old. They think the girls are hiding, waiting to be rescued. Sarah allowed herself a small, fierce smile. They don't know my daughter spent her whole life learning how to handle storms. Chen raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we let them think they have control of the situation, while they're watching for the cavalry to arrive. Sarah pulled up Emma's detailed maps of the tunnel system. We send in someone they'll never suspect. Someone who looks exactly like what they think she is, a worried mom trying to save her kid. It's too dangerous, Chen protested. More dangerous than letting them start a war? Sarah met the president's eyes. "Sir, they're not expecting the tornado lady from Kansas to be a threat. That's our advantage." The president studied her for a long moment, seeing past the borrowed blazer to the woman who'd faced down a twister to save his granddaughter. "What do you need?" "My old waitress uniform," Sarah said, "and about 20 minutes to teach Agent Chen how to make the perfect cup of coffee." The service entrance to Sidwell Friends looked exactly like every back door Sarah had ever used at diners and restaurants across Kansas. Same metal handle worn smooth by countless hands, same scuff marks where delivery carts had bumped the frame. Even the security keypad matched the one Lou had installed last year. "Communications check," Chen's voice whispered through her nearly invisible earpiece. Sarah adjusted her ponytail, making sure the microphone hidden in her collar stayed in position. "Clear?" She smoothed her old waitress uniform, coffee stains and all. "Starting phase 1. She pulled a catering cart from the van Chen had procured, loading it with urns of coffee and boxes of pastries. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of 1,000 similar setups. "Target confirmed," Chen reported. "Harrison just arrived on scene. SWAT team standing by for his orders." Perfect. They were so focused on the front of the building, on the expected tactical response, they'd never notice one more service worker entering through the back, especially not one they'd already dismissed as harmless. The keypad yielded easily to the code Emma had memorized during her exploring. Sarah pushed her cart through familiar-looking service corridors, hearing Emma's voice in her head, describing every turn. "The science lab's on the 2nd floor, but there's a back stairwell that connects to the old basement level, the one they don't use anymore, the one where, if Sarah's theory was correct, Malcolm's team had set up their makeshift laboratory. Movement ahead," Chen warned. "Armed security, approaching your position." Sarah turned the corner, pushing her cart, head down, just another worker doing her job. 2 men in tactical gear passed without a second glance. Their lapel pins caught the fluorescent light, no blue dots. "4 more in the main office," Emma's voice came through suddenly, transmitted from her hiding place through their secure channel. "They're getting nervous. The guy in charge keeps checking his phone." "Stay hidden," Sarah whispered. "Both of you." Though privately, she thanked whatever twist of fate had given her a daughter who could keep her head in a crisis. The service elevator was exactly where Emma had described. Sarah swiped the keycard they'd cloned from the school's maintenance system and began her descent into the old fallout shelter level. The basement air was cool and damp, carrying the sharp chemical smell she remembered from Sophie's description of the Oval Office coffee plot. She followed her nose to a heavy door marked Storage B7. "Mum." Emma's voice was barely a whisper now. "Sophie says that's where she saw the teacher bringing big boxes late at night, the ones with the weird labels." Sarah positioned her cart and took a deep breath. "Beginning phase 2. She knocked on the door, channeling every moment she'd ever spent serving difficult customers. The man who opened it wore a lab coat over tactical gear, his expression shifting from alarm to dismissal as he took in her uniform. "Break room's upstairs," he started to say. "Oh, thank goodness." Sarah pushed past him with the practiced determination of every caterer on a deadline. "They said you guys needed coffee down here? Some kind of security thing going on?" She was already setting up cups, moving with efficient certainty. "They didn't tell me what kind of creamer you want, but I brought both." "You can't be here," the man said, but his colleague was already reaching for a cup. "Just let her set it up," the second man said. "We've been here since 4 a.m. Sarah kept up a steady stream of familiar chatter as she served coffee, noting positions of guards, weapons, and most importantly, the rows of chemical equipment lining the walls. Her hidden camera captured everything. "Harrison wants an update," one of the men said, checking his phone. "The formula. Almost ready," the man in the lab coat replied. 2 more hours, Max, once it's concentrated enough." "Special blend?" Sarah asked brightly, indicating the chemical apparatus. "My kid's taking chemistry upstairs, always talking about experiments and formulas." The men exchanged sharp looks. Your kid goes here. Oh, sure, Emma Miller. She's friends with Sophie Washington. Such a sweet girl, Sophie. Always talking about her grandfather. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Weapons that had been casually held were now pointed at strategic angles. The man in the lab coat spoke into his radio. "Sir, we have a situation." Sarah kept smiling, kept playing the cheerful waitress, even as she pressed the hidden button on her coffee urn, the one that would release Agent Chen's special blend of knockout gas, designed to look exactly like steam from hot coffee. "Oh my," she said, as the men began to slump. "Must be stronger than usual. I always say coffee should never put you to sleep." She was already sending the signal to Chen as the last guard hit the floor. Within seconds, the real SWAT team would be moving in through her entrance route, securing the evidence and the suspects before Harrison's compromised forces could interfere. Sarah snapped pictures of the chemical formulae on the whiteboards, the shipping manifests, the detailed plans for the summit. But her real target was the laptop sitting open on the main desk, the one showing surveillance footage of the president's private office. "Phase 2 complete," she whispered into her mic. "Tell the president we found his leak." "And Emma?" "Yeah. Mom, you're definitely getting an A in chemistry this semester." A sudden noise behind her made Sarah spin around. Webb stood in the doorway, his weapon aimed steadily at her heart. "Mrs. Miller," he said, almost admiringly. "I should have known. No one's really that perfect at serving coffee." Sarah smiled, thinking of all those years handling tough situations at the diner. "Actually," she said, "I am." She jerked her head toward his cup on the desk. "But I learned a long time ago to always serve the problem customer's decaf." Webb's expression changed as the realization hit him, but it was too late. The specially formulated sedative in his cup had already done its work. Sarah caught his gun as he fell. "Phase 3 complete," she reported, checking his pulse. "Though we might need a few more coffee cups down here for cleanup." Looking at the unconscious conspirators, Sarah couldn't help but think of Lou's motto, painted above the diner's counter: "Life's storms make us stronger." She hadn't understood how true that was until now. The real SWAT team was moving in, securing the scene. Above, she could hear Harrison being taken into custody, protesting all the way. But Sarah was already focusing on her next task, making sure her daughter never tried to duplicate this particular chemistry experiment. Some things, after all, were better left to the professionals, like serving coffee, stopping coups, and teaching your children when to hide from storms and when to face them head-on. The Situation Room hummed with controlled chaos as Sarah delivered her report. Her waitress uniform stood out sharply against the military uniforms and suits surrounding the conference table, but no one seemed to notice anymore. "Secretary Malcolm is in custody," she stated, sliding surveillance photos across the table. "Along with Webb, Harrison, and 14 others. The chemical lab has been secured, and all formulas are being analyzed by our people." She paused. "The real ones, with the blue dots on their pins." The president studied the evidence, his face grave. "And the school?" "Locked down and secure. Emma and Sophie are safe." Sarah checked her tablet. "Though Emma would like everyone to know she's already written her report on what I did this semester, and hopes it counts for extra credit." A few tired chuckles broke the tension. Even Chen cracked a smile. "Don't encourage her," Sarah added. "She's already talking about a future in covert operations." The humor faded as new alerts flashed across the room's screens. Malcolm's allies in Congress were mobilizing, preparing to challenge the legitimacy of the arrests. Media outlets were beginning to pick up fragments of the story, spinning wild theories about the school incident. "Sir," the Attorney General warned, "they'll try to claim executive overreach without concrete proof of the conspiracy." "You mean, like this?" Sarah pulled Sophie's tablet from her apron pocket, complete with timestamps, voice recordings, and a very detailed log of meetings kept by a certain 8-year-old who everyone thought was just playing games during boring dinners. Sophie, who'd been quiet since joining them with Emma, finally spoke up. "I named the file Unicorn Princess Diary, so nobody would look at it." The president hugged his granddaughter close. "That's my girl." The room's tension ratcheted up again as an aide rushed in. "Sir, Malcolm's attorneys are here. They're threatening to go public with claims about Sophie's safety at the school, suggesting the administration endangered her by letting her attend class with a friend." Sarah interrupted. "Under constant protection with a fully secured facility." She nodded to Chen, who pulled up the school's real security logs. The only danger came from Malcolm's own people who didn't count on 2 girls being smarter than they looked. "Speaking of looking smart," Emma chimed in from her corner. "Mum, you should see the news. You're trending again." The room's main screen filled with footage from the school's security cameras, showing Sarah in her waitress uniform, calmly serving coffee to armed conspirators, moments before they collapsed. The headlines were already rolling. "Tornado Mom Strikes Again. White House Assistant Thwarts Security Threat. From Diner to Defender. Sarah Miller's Remarkable Journey. President's Ordinary Assistant Reveals Extraordinary Courage." "So much for and keeping a low profile," Chen muttered. "Actually," Sarah said, "this helps us. They're so focused on the dramatic story, the waitress who saved the day, they're missing the bigger picture, the evidence we gathered, the connections we traced. The perfect cover story," the president finished. "While they're busy interviewing your old diner customers about your coffee-serving skills, our real teams can finish rounding up the rest of Malcolm's network," Chen concluded. "Starting with..." The room's doors burst open. Malcolm himself strode in, flanked by federal marshals he'd apparently convinced to back him. His confidence faltered slightly at finding the president, joint chiefs, and attorney general all calmly waiting. "This is an outrage," he began. "I have proof that this entire situation was manufactured by whom?" Sarah stepped forward, still in her coffee-stained uniform. "The waitress from Kansas? The one you didn't even notice in your secret meetings? Or maybe..." She held up a small evidence bag containing a lapel pin. "By whoever manufactured these clever little fakes." Malcolm's face went pale as she continued. "The interesting thing about serving coffee is that people don't really see you. They talk freely about chemical formulas and coup plans and how to manipulate school security systems. They even leave their laptops open, showing all those encrypted messages about the summit. You have no idea what you're dealing with," Malcolm snarled. "The forces behind this are all named in Sophie's Unicorn Diary," the president cut in. "Along with dates, times, and recordings. My granddaughter has quite a memory for details. Must run in the family." The marshals with Malcolm were already lowering their weapons, finally noticing that everyone in the room wore pins with blue dots. Everyone except Malcolm. "It's over," Sarah said quietly, "though I'd be happy to get you some coffee while you wait for processing. I hear the prison cafeteria needs help with their beverage service." As Malcolm was led away, the president turned to Sarah. "I suppose this means you'll be wanting your old job back." Less excitement at the diner. Sarah watched Emma and Sophie huddled over their tablets, already documenting the day's events in their own unique way. She thought about the storm that had brought them here and all the ones yet to come. "Actually, sir," she replied, straightening her apron, "I think I'm right where I need to be, though we should probably talk about hazard pay and Emma's chemistry grade." The East Room of the White House gleamed with polished floors and crystal chandeliers as Sarah adjusted her dress uniform. Not a waitress outfit this time, but the formal attire of a senior White House staff member. The Presidential Medal of Freedom felt heavy against her collar. "Stop fidgeting," Emma whispered from beside her. "You look fine," says the girl who got to wear jeans to a White House ceremony. "Special dispensation," Sophie chimed in from Emma's other side. "Grandpa says heroes get to dress however they want." The president himself stood at the podium, addressing a room full of journalists, diplomats, and various officials, all wearing pins with very visible blue dots. 1 month ago, he began, our nation faced a crisis that few knew existed, a conspiracy that threatened not just my administration, but the very foundation of our democracy. That crisis was averted not through force of arms or complex political maneuvering, but through the courage and wisdom of ordinary Americans who proved to be anything but ordinary. Sarah watched the faces in the crowd as the president detailed the official version of events, the thwarted chemical attack, the prevented coup, the successful trade summit that had secured peace in the Pacific. All thanks to a waitress from Kansas and 2 observant 12-year-olds. The classified details would remain sealed for decades. The full extent of Malcolm's network, the foreign powers involved, the precise nature of the formulas they'd discovered. But the public story was compelling enough on its own. "Mom," Emma nudged her, "Channel 7 is filming you again." Sarah maintained her professional smile, the one she'd perfected over years of handling difficult customers. The media had dubbed her America's favorite waitress turned hero, a title that made her cringe but served its purpose. Every interview about her coffee-serving skills was another layer of cover for the ongoing counterintelligence operations. In recognition of extraordinary service to her nation, the president continued, "It is my honor to formally appoint Sarah Miller as Special Advisor for Internal Security. Her unique perspective and proven ability to see what others miss will be invaluable as we strengthen our institutions against future threats." The applause was genuine. Sarah had earned the respect of even the most hardened intelligence officials. As Chen liked to say, nobody ever suspected the waitress. A fact that had already helped them identify 3 more sleeper cells. After the ceremony, Sarah found herself in the family quarters, sharing coffee with the president, while Emma and Sophie worked on their latest secret project nearby. "The new security protocols are in place," she reported. "Every agency has adopted the blue dot system with rotating authentication markers. No more fake pins. And the diner?" Sarah smiled. "Lou's doing fine. The hero special is his best-selling menu item, and he's hired 3 new waitresses to handle the tourist crowds." She sipped her coffee, "Though none of them can make your coffee quite like I did." Speaking of which, the president slid a folder across the table. "There's something else we need to discuss. The girls' new security project." Sarah opened the folder to find detailed plans for what looked like, "Is this a coffee shop? Right here in the White House." Their idea, a cover business for maintaining civilian contacts. Sophie's quite convinced it's essential for national security. And Emma's probably already designing the logo. They're calling it the Blue Dot Cafe. He looked amused. "Apparently, it's going to revolutionize both coffee service and counterintelligence." Sarah thought about it. A legitimate business, right in the heart of government, where people spoke freely and trusted the staff, where observation could be disguised as customer service and intelligence gathering as quality control. "You know," she said slowly, "they might be onto something. Every good operation needs a cover story, and everyone does need coffee." The president nodded. "I thought you'd say that, which is why—" He pulled out another folder. "We've already drawn up the business permits, assuming you're willing to add proprietor to your new titles." Through the window, Sarah could see the Washington Monument gleaming in the distance. So far from her Kansas diner, and yet somehow exactly where she was meant to be. "Sir," she replied with a smile, "I'd be honored to serve." Later that evening, as she helped the girls with their elaborate plans for the cafe's secret back office, Sarah thought about how life's biggest changes often came disguised as ordinary moments. A storm that brought a lost girl to her door. A cup of coffee served at just the right time. A mother and daughter who saw what needed to be done and found the courage to do it. "Mom," Emma called from her desk. "How do you feel about hidden panels in the coffee bar, for, national security purposes?" Sarah exchanged glances with Chen, who was unsuccessfully trying not to laugh. "Honey," she said, "let's start with getting the regular coffee service right. Then we can talk about secret panels." But she made a mental note to review Emma's designs later. After all, the best security measures were the ones nobody saw coming, just like the best agents were the ones nobody suspected. And sometimes the best way to serve your country was one cup of coffee at a time. 3 months after the Medal of Freedom ceremony, Sarah stood in front of a familiar broken screen door in Cedar Grove. The tornado damage had been repaired, the roof replaced, the windows upgraded with bulletproof glass that looked deceptively ordinary. Just like everything else in her life now. "It's smaller than I remember," Emma said, coming up beside her with a box of books. "Everything looks smaller when you've been living in Washington." Sarah unlocked the door, all 5 of its new high security, locks disguised as simple deadbolts. But sometimes you need to remember where you came from. The house had been transformed inside, though casual visitors would never notice. The kitchen still had its worn linoleum and familiar coffee maker, but now there was a secure satellite uplink hidden in the microwave. The basement storm shelter doubled as a safe room with direct lines to the White House. Even the old family photos on the walls contained sophisticated surveillance equipment. "Mrs. Miller," Lou's voice boomed from next door. "Or should I say, Madam Special Advisor?" "Just Sarah," she corrected, hugging her former boss. Especially here, Lou looked good. The diner's newfound fame had brought in enough business for him to finally retire, though he still came in most mornings to make coffee and tell tourists increasingly embellished stories about his former waitress. "The blue dot's doing well?" he asked with a knowing wink. Sarah nodded. The White House coffee shop had become the worst-kept secret in Washington. Everyone knew it was somehow connected to intelligence work, but nobody could prove exactly how. The combination of excellent coffee and potential national security made it the most popular spot in the capital. "Emma's redesigned the loyalty card program 3 times, she said. "Something about optimizing data collection patterns. And the new house." Lou gestured at the recently completed building next door, a perfect match for the other homes on the street, except for its reinforced walls and underground command center. "Agent Chen's team moves in next week. Can't leave America's favorite diner unprotected after all." The cover story was that Sarah split her time between Washington and Kansas, keeping her small-town roots while serving her country. The truth was more complex. Cedar Grove had become a vital backup location, a place where important meetings could happen away from prying eyes. The town's residents, proud of their local hero, had become unwitting participants in national security. Emma came out carrying Sophie's overnight bag. The girls still had their room at the White House, but they preferred spending weekends in Kansas. Something about the storm cellar making the perfect tactical planning center. "The president sends his regards," Sarah told Lou. "Says the coffee in Washington still isn't quite the same." "Course not," Lou grinned. "They don't have the secret ingredient." "Which is?" "Knowing how to weather a storm." He looked up at the Kansas sky, clear and blue today, but always holding the potential for change. "Speaking of which, you hear about those interesting folks asking questions at the gas station?" Sarah's expression didn't change, but she noted the information carefully. "Tourist season's picking up early this year." "Sure is. Lot of them wearing mighty fancy pins, too." Emma and Sophie exchanged significant looks before disappearing into the house, no doubt to update their ever-growing intelligence database, or possibly to raid the cookie jar. With those two, it was sometimes hard to tell the difference. Sarah watched them go, remembering that first stormy night that had changed everything. The scared girl in a rainbow backpack, the mother making a split-second decision, the waitress who saw what others missed. "You know," Lou said quietly, "some folks wondered why you keep coming back here." Big, important Washington job like yours. Kansas is home, Sarah replied simply. Besides, the best way to spot a storm coming is to know what clear skies look like first. Her phone buzzed, a message from Chen about suspicious movements near the Pacific Rim Embassy. Time to head back to Washington soon. But first, she had a pot of coffee to make, stories to hear, and 2 junior intelligence analysts to remind that unauthorized surveillance of the neighbor's cat was still not approved protocol. Some things, after all, hadn't changed. She was still a mum, still watched for storms, still served coffee, just to a slightly different crowd these days. And if sometimes that coffee came with a side of national security, well, that was just part of the daily special. 1 year too. The day after the tornado that started it all, Sarah stood in the newly renovated Blue Dot Cafe, watching Washington's power brokers mingle with tourists and locals. The shop had become a legend in its own right, part coffee house, part unofficial briefing room, and part living memorial to an unlikely story of courage. "Mom!" Emma called from behind the counter. "Sophie's got another special order from the Treasury Department," Sarah smiled, recognizing the code. Their ordering system had evolved into something of an art form. Double espresso meant potential security breach, extra foam indicated foreign involvement, and a sprinkle of cinnamon was shorthand for check the secure channel. "I'll handle this one," she said, moving to the specialty drinks station. The Treasury Secretary's assistant was waiting, her blue-dotted pin gleaming. "The usual?" Sarah asked, already knowing this was anything but usual. "With an extra shot," the woman replied carefully. "It's going to be a long night of accounting." Sarah's hidden earpiece buzzed with Chen's voice. Multiple hits on facial recognition. 3 of Malcolm's former associates just entered the Capitol building. "I'll have that right up," Sarah said smoothly, her hands moving through the familiar dance of coffee preparation while her mind processed the intelligence. "Though you might want to avoid the afternoon rush. I hear the Hill gets pretty busy around 3 today." The warning was received with a slight nod. By the time the assistant left with her perfectly crafted latte, 3 security teams were already moving to intercept the suspects. "They still don't get it, do they?" The president had arrived quietly, taking his usual seat by the window. "No fanfare, no announcement. Just another regular customer at his favorite coffee shop. All this time, and they still haven't figured out how we stay one step ahead." "People see what they expect to see," Sarah replied, bringing him his usual order, black coffee with 2 sugars, served in the special cup that could detect toxins. A mom and her daughter running a coffee shop, a couple of kids playing on their tablets, nothing worth noticing. Through the window, she could see Sophie showing a group of tourists her history project, actually a sophisticated monitoring system disguised as a school presentation. The girl had grown in the past year, more confident now, but still keeping that perfect balance of insight and innocence that made her such an effective observer. "Speaking of noticing things," the president said, "that storm system moving in." Sarah nodded. They'd developed an early warning system based on her years of Kansas weather watching, correlating atmospheric patterns with spikes in suspicious activity. The biggest security breaches they'd discovered often came during natural disasters when normal protocols were disrupted. "Emma's already updated the shelter protocols," she assured him, "and Chen's team is running standard weather preparations. Their code for heightened security measures." "Good." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "You know, when I first offered you that job, I never imagined that your granddaughter's school science project would turn into a national security protocol, or that a Kansas waitress would revolutionize intelligence gathering, that we'd all find exactly what we needed," he finished. "Sophie needed someone who could see her, not just protect her. The intelligence community needed fresh eyes, and you needed a bigger storm cellar," Sarah suggested with a smile. The president laughed. "Among other things." The cafe's door chimed as Chen entered, wearing her usual suit, but with a barista. apron thrown over it, their signal for urgent news. But before she could reach them, Emma's voice came through their earpieces. Blue dot breach at the Lincoln Memorial. 2 subjects, matching last week's watch list. Sophie's got eyes on them through the tourist cam network. Sarah was already moving, her coffee service seamlessly transitioning into operational mode. The president remained casually seated, maintaining their cover while monitoring the situation through his secure phone. "Just another day at the office?" he asked as she passed. Sarah paused, thinking of all the storms she'd weathered, natural and political, and all the ones yet to come. She thought of David, and how proud he would be of the family they'd built, the service they provided, the difference they made. "Actually," she replied, "it's better. It's home." Outside, the Washington sky darkened with approaching rain, but Sarah Miller wasn't worried. She'd learned that the best way to handle any storm was with preparation, courage, and occasionally, the perfect cup of coffee. And somewhere in Kansas, a tornado siren began its monthly test, its wail carrying across the plains where her journey had begun. But now it sounded less like a warning and more like a reminder. Sometimes, the biggest changes in life came disguised as ordinary moments, and the most important work happened in plain sight. Sarah adjusted her own blue-dotted pin and got back to work. After all, she had coffee to serve, a country to protect, and 2 brilliant girls to keep from adding facial recognition to the loyalty card program, at least for now. Just another day at the Blue Dot Cafe, where every cup of coffee came with a side of national security, and every storm brought the opportunity to prove that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, especially if they had the right backup, the right cause, and the perfect brewing technique.